The Florida Panthers found a way to bounce back once again after a mini losing streak. Today on the show, we bring Nick Fairbanks from PantherBarkway.com to discuss this 3-0 win over the Ottawa Senators and how the Florida Panthers point pace looks now compared to last season. And we also talk about the state of the Atlantic Division, what's going on in Charlotte, and so much more on today's episode of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast.
Your Locked On Panthers, your daily podcast on the Florida Panthers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And welcome into this Friday, March 4th edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. We're it's your team every day. Thank you for making the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast your first listen of the day. I'm Armando Velez from PantherBarkway.com, and you can follow me on Twitter at MondoMan12. Follow the show account on Twitter at LO_FLA Panthers. You can also follow the national show Locked On NHL and the Crosscheck NHL show with Andrew Berkshire and Mary Clark. They'll be covering all the regular season activities around the National Hockey League. So the losing streak is over. The Florida Panthers are victorious once again after defeating the Ottawa Senators by a final score of 3-0 in Sunrise, Florida. And here to talk about this game for the Florida Panthers is my buddy Nick Fairbanks from PantherBarkway.com. And as we discussed on the show, we'll be having themes on the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast. Wednesdays is Winans Wednesday, and for Fridays, this is the debut of Fairbanks Friday. So, Nick, thank you for coming on, and thank you for saying yes to doing this, man.
No problem. Just sorry that we're a week late. I do appreciate you understanding about that, and can't wait to move forward with it.
Absolutely, man, and thank you once again for definitely doing this. So, let's start with this. Not only this game, but let's talk a little bit about where we were coming into this one. Of course, 4 days off, 3-game losing streak at home, something that was really unheard of for the Florida Panthers really this whole season. You go from only losing 3 games at home all season, and then you get 3 losses in a row just like that. And I was calculating, man, right before this game, the point pace that the Florida Panthers were at, coming into this game, they were at a 116-point pace. Last year, though it was a 56-game season, their pace would have been 115. So the losing streak that the Florida Panthers had, and then of course snapping it against the Ottawa Senators, it just seems to continue that trend of what the Florida Panthers have been able to do these last 2 seasons under the new management of Bill Zito. I know Coach Q's not here, but it's crazy to see how this Panthers team, when they go in lumps, they never last long.
No, and you can't say that about previous seasons or even under previous management. The fact that the consistency was never there. I mean, probably the only thing that was consistent on a night in, night out basis was you didn't know if you're going to go in with a win or not, or, if you're going to string together a couple wins. If anything, a lot of Panther fans out there were used to actually having losing streaks. So the fact is that over the last 2 seasons, and I'll even mark on 3 seasons, that it's been more of a consistent thing where they're putting wins together. They're not losing as much. And, the one point I do want to bring up is the fact that they're losing now and not in sometime in April, late April or May, is a good thing. I think this time of adversity is good for the team to show, like, hey, it's not going to be as easy as it has been all season. I mean, because come on, they were blowing doors off of teams, but it's good to have some adversity to kind of show the character of the team, and I think they responded pretty well tonight.
Yeah, and the fact that this came on mostly secondary scoring. The 2 power play goals that they had came from their second unit. Lomberg gets an even strength goal in this one. Only the 4th time where the where Alexander Barkov and Jonathan Huberdeau play in the same game that they both go without a point.
Mm-hmm.
In years past, the Florida Panthers would have found ways to lose games like this.
100%. What happens is you become too reliant on your stars, and it happens. I mean, you have to have your best players be their best players game in and game out, but there are going to be some games where there's going to be a stretch of games where they're not. I mean, I may be the only one, or I may be one of few, but that thought Huberdeau had kind of a rough night tonight. He had a few turnovers that led to some chances shorthanded. And then it just seemed like Barkov was, himself, but just couldn't get the puck to go in. But this is the type of game where they were fighting some demons. I felt like, they're coming on in off a 3-game losing streak. The puck wasn't going in. They were getting goalied by Anton Forsberg, which played phenomenal tonight. So hats off to him. But, the shots just weren't going in, but they were getting some dirty, greasy goals. And those are the type of goals you're going to be looking forward to in the playoffs. So I think this was a good measuring stick for them, and to kind of understand what it's going to take to win going forward.
And regardless of the opponent, regardless of record, it's a good test that when games are this close going into the third period, and I do want to say this publicly for everyone listening. We spoke about this pre-recording that we're going to discuss this, but going into this game in our chat, I said, I don't know why I'm so nervous about this game. And then once the Florida Panthers went up 3-0, of course, I had a little bit of time to process between the first 2 periods on how they were dominating possession. After that goal, I said, this game was never in doubt. And then you quoted my statement before the game started, saying, tell that to your face. I'm like, okay, you got me there. You got me there. So But it's so easy based on the past few years to get so nervous about a game like this. That the previous 3 games they lose to not starters in net for the other team. And then of course Ottawa is the main Forsberg is the main starter for Ottawa, and even Matt Murray has had a great month of February. It's just the Ottawa Senators just haven't been able to score. This is their 3rd shutout in the last calendar month. The
Mm-hmm.
3rd time they've been shut out in the last calendar month. But man, this is just a character. If I had to put a word for a win like this, I think you could call this a character win for this team, because it's easy to whenever you're continuing to put the amount of shots on goal like they did in the previous 3 games, it's
Mm-hmm.
so easy to get discouraged and say, these shots aren't going in. We're not going to continue trying. But the character that this Florida Panthers team has, from the top down to their core 3, to the bottom 6 as well, which is of course where the scoring came. The best word I could say is character. Do you have a specific word that you would like to use for a win like this?
Gritty. It
Gritty.
was gritty from the start. And you said it. It's character, because from the start of the game, I mean, Brady Tkachuk was just running around. Nobody was like kind of keeping him in check until Lomberg had to kind of straighten him out a little bit. But and then the game kind of got chippier as it went on. Even when he went to go cross check Hornquist towards the end of the game. But right there, it's just you have to play a certain way with certain teams, and Ottawa is definitely a more physical team, and that's how they try to intimidate, and that's how they try to score goals. But they never really had any offensive time in the offensive zone. So the Panthers were doing very well with that, and I know the analytics people are going to love this. I mean, just with all the shots that the Panthers have put on over the last couple of games, if you look at every single game, they were expected to win or have expected goals in all of those games. And tonight was just another one of those, and it went their way. So you love to see the team react the way they did, especially when Ekblad got hit, and then when Hornquist got hit, and then, I think former Panther Josh Brown tried to take out Lomberg, and that didn't end too well for him. But still love you, Josh. But other than that, you can't mess with a Lamborghini.
Absolutely not. And he also got on the scoreboard tonight. And David Dork had a question to Ryan Lomberg about the Ryan Lomberg hat trick, which is a goal, a fight, and a hair flip. So great question by David Dork after the game asking that one. So we're going to discuss more on the time on ice, how it was so skewed towards different type of numbers based on the amount of penalties the Ottawa Senators had in this game. And of course, we're going to talk more about the experience versus the inexperience as well in the next segment of Locked On Panthers. But first, we're going to tell you all about Built Bar. And this is the time of year where I pretty much given up on all my New Year's resolutions, but not this year. I'm sticking to my resolution to eat right thanks to Built Bar. It almost feels like it's not really a resolution because I actually enjoy eating them. Have you tried the Puffs? If you haven't, you're missing out on one of Built Bar's best tasting bars. Puffs are the best first ever protein infused marshmallow. They're fluffy, they're marshmallowy. They're not just a protein bar, they're a treat, and they're covered in 100% real chocolate. Puffs are a fan favorite with some incredible flavors: yummy, cinnamony, churro, coconut marshmallow, banana cream pie. So good. These are going to be your favorite. Low calorie, high protein. Replace your candy bar with these. These are better. A typical candy bar can be anywhere between 2 to 300 calories. Compare that to a candy bar that has around 240 calories, 30 grams of sugar, and a dozen of net carbs. At Built Bar, they're all about taste. They make it taste delicious first, then figure out how to make it healthy. I don't know how, but they pull it off every time. Go to Built.com and use promo code LOCK15 and get 15% off your order. Use promo code LOCK15 for 15% off at Built.com. Thank you for making the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast your first listen of the day. And for your next listen of the day, check out the Locked On Now podcast. It's nightly recaps of every NHL game with analysis from our local experts. It's free and available wherever you get podcasts. So back on the Friday, March 4th edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast, I'm Armando Velez. I got Nick Fairbanks from Panther Parkway here on this Fairbanks Friday on the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast. But for people who didn't watch the game, they're going to see 17 of 17 saves for Sergei Bobrovsky. But no way in hell does that tell the whole story, because the Ottawa Senators, they got shut out, sure. But the amount of short-handed opportunities that the Florida Panthers were giving them against any other team, Nick, after that, so many chances, likely one is going to go in, and the Florida Panthers could have been in trouble against any other team.
So when that was happening, the first thought I thought about is, what if we were playing Tampa Bay? What if we were playing Carolina? What if we were playing Boston? And sure enough, the fourth team is the Toronto Maple Leafs. We can't have that happen. They need to clean it up, and the power play is still of a concern right now. It seems like the first unit doesn't move around a lot. They're just content with passing the puck around and not shooting as much, or just getting that one timer on the side. Whereas the second unit, as we kind of, mentioned, they got it done tonight. They scored twice, and there were two greasy goals. So, and then on Bobrovsky, I was going to be really irritated if he didn't get the shutout tonight, because outside of those shorthanded chances, there was really no danger to him, even, not getting a shutout tonight. So I'm very happy for him, but definitely some things that the Florida Panthers need to clean up on.
Absolutely. And I'm looking at the total penalty infraction minutes for the Senators and the Panthers. The Senators had 55, while the Panthers had 23. And I guess, of course, I'm going to break this down into two parts. One of them has to do with inexperience versus experience. Out of position, hips not lined up, which is causing some of the hooks, some of the trips, some of the cross checks. And the other one is, when it comes to the misconduct penalties, a lack of discipline. I think that the Ottawa Senators had 4 players who had misconducts towards the end of the game. And of course, when you're losing the way you're losing, and of course in a rebuild that Ottawa is in, it's not just this game for Ottawa. This is things that kind of brew. Like I said at the beginning, this is their third time in the last calendar month that they've been shut out. So let's talk a little bit about the inexperience. This is the third youngest team in the NHL. I mean, the second is New York Rangers, and look at the season they're having. But it let's talk about a little bit of the inexperience and versus the experience for the Panthers. And the Panthers, they really took advantage of their lack of experience, and they were the more composed team.
Definitely, and you could see that from the get-go. I think there was a lot of things that the refs let go in the first probably 10 minutes of the game. Try to let them play, but at the same time, that you got to keep a handle on the game, and eventually, they kind of did, but I felt like at the end of the game, that's when everything kind of broke loose. But the inexperience on a hockey team is one of those things where you live and you learn. And in order to get respect, you have to give respect. I felt there was a couple times that the Ottawa coach was yelling at the referees for probably no reason, or even that challenge that they made on the first Marchment goal that probably shouldn't have been called for a challenge at all, because there was no issue with it, and yet he was yelling at the refs because Marchment supposedly interfered with the goaltender when he was pushed in. So I think it has a lot to do with coaching and setting your team up for success and getting them ready to play. You mentioned the New York Rangers. I mean, they're young too, but look who they have behind the bench. They have Gerard Gallant. The guy knows how to get the best out of players. He knows how to stay composed when he needs to, and he knows when to get emotional, and he expects the same out of his players. So I think Ottawa's just in the midst right now where they're trying to define their identity, and it's going to take a while. But, at the same time, you have to have a coach that's also going to be able to guide them that way too.
And here's the thing. He's yelling at the refs who aren't making the initial call. The replay center in I believe it's Secaucus, New Jersey, if I'm not mistaken. They're making the call, and I get it. It's more frustration. It's not necessarily mad at those specific refs, but it just comes down to like I said, composure comes from the coach. If you're like, and I see it in high school games all the time, in middle school games. I've had games at the end where the coaches are trying to blame the refs after their loss, and then their kids start yelling. And I'm just thinking to myself, you're setting a really good example. But I can't say it. I'm not allowed to say that out loud after a game because of course I can get in trouble. But I'm thinking that at the time, and I'm sure referees at the NHL level are thinking that as well. So it really starts from really the coach, and I'm really glad you made that point. But let's talk a little bit about we talked about a little bit about the experience and the composure. Now let's talk a little bit of the wacky ice time that the Florida Panthers had due to the amount of power play opportunities, which was a total of 9. I mean, it all started with that double major, the challenge that led to the 5-on-3 as continuing part of that double minor. But let's take a look, and I'm screen sharing for the people watching on YouTube. Look at this. John and Huberdeau, 11 minutes and 14 seconds on just the power play alone. 22 minutes. And they were talking about how Radko Gudas, what most of the first period, he wasn't really on the bench. He spent like 4 minutes of total ice time really in the first period. And the fact that this third and fourth, the fourth line got one in, the second power play unit got one in after really struggling, just really goes to show. And look, Anton Lundell on shorthanded, even though they a few shorthanded opportunities, he's leading the way continuously. Your boy is leading the forwards in time on ice shorthanded. And just this was a game all about a game all about the special teams, man. We got to give the special teams a lot of credit. I know they went 2 for 9, but those amount of opportunities, they were bound to go in. You keep attacking Forsberg. Forsberg is going to get tired enough that you're going to let one in. And you mentioned it, greasy goals. You keep attacking right in front of the net, and eventually they go in. And let's talk a little bit also about Andrew Brunette trying to mix Barkov and Ekblad at the point. What do you think about the mixing and matching of Barkov and Ekblad at the point?
So 2 things about it is, I mean, I want to go back to an inexperienced thing. So taking all those penalties, once you take those penalties and you're putting your team behind, and I think after the first period, I think Ottawa was pretty gassed. with how many penalties they took and how long they were on the penalty kill. One thing I will mention is that I saw Mackenzie Weegar was under a minute on the power play, which was surprising to me because I had a feeling that they were trying to mix things up as well up on the defensive side, which probably then alludes to Ekblad and Barkov playing the point. I like the change. I think they're going to have to play more with it. I think they're going to be successful if they get Ekblad down on the face-off circle a little bit more instead of the point. Let Barkov run point and get it down to Ekblad. And Ekblad is such an accurate shot that it'll be lethal, and I think it'll provide dividends to it. Plus, it gives Huberdeau on the other side of the ice another option to pass to instead of just Barkov all the time. He can end up going down low, throwing it on net, or he can go across to Ekblad for a one-timer. So I can't wait to see what they're going to do with it in the next game or two.
Yeah, and those amount of opportunities gives you a chance to experiment, which, you're not going to get 9 power play opportunities every single game. But hey, I mean, the power play has been a struggle in a way, but this is I believe the broadcast. I could be mistaken. I think the broadcast said that this is their first game this season that they've had 2 straight games with a power play goal. Thumbs up on me if that was accurate. I'm like, wait, what? So
are we talking about the first unit or the second unit, or just overall that Florida's had power play goals in back-to-back games?
I think they spoke overall. I'm gonna have to rewatch it. Thankfully, ESPN Plus allows me to watch it on demand, so I'm gonna have to go back and find where they said that. They said back-to-back games of something related to the power play. So, I mean, still, when your power play has been, let's call it what it is, average this season, and you get a little bit of momentum, especially having 2 power play goals last game against Edmonton, and carrying it over, and all the opportunities they had to win previously, it's a good night for the Florida Panthers, and it's just a way to kind of be a little at ease, really, when this team just snaps a losing streak and just say everything is fine, nothing to freak out. And it's just with this team, they just find ways. And like we said in the last segment, they continue to show their character. And let's talk a little bit about the shot and goal advantage, 48-17, continuing to dominate possession.
I think it was 24-3 after the first period.
24. It was 25-7 after the first period. 38-10, 37-10, excuse me, after the second. And 48-7 after the third. So giveaways, the Florida Panthers did give it away a little bit more. And Ottawa did have a few takeaways, but the Florida Panthers also won the faceoff circle. Something that I've been seeing a little bit more lately, that the Florida Panthers have won more faceoffs as of late. Even in some of their losses, they've been better in that. So there's little bits of improvement here and there that we're seeing. So and it's happening now. We're a few weeks from the trade deadline. We're when this recording drops, we'll be 17 days away from the trade deadline. So the Florida Panthers, I think they're going to be okay.
I believe so too. There's little things in their game they need to definitely clean up still, and luckily they have enough time to do it, which is why I said I'm okay with them having the streak that they've had for the last week to 10 days. I am a little worried about certain individuals right now, just because it seems like they're in a funk that is lasting longer than what we're used to. One of the players is probably Carter Verhaeghe, who I felt like had a rough night tonight. He had a couple penalties, and I think he's really going through the motions right now. But other than that, I mean, this streak could not have come at a more perfect time, I think, right now. Now it's up to Bill Zito what he wants to do, whether he wants to add a defenseman or two, or if he wants to go and try and add that top winger for Alexander Barkov to go through the playoffs. Now, I said it on Twitter yesterday. I'm all in. If it is available and you can go get somebody like Claude Giroux, and you can go get a defenseman like Chychrun or Giordano, you do it. this is your window. You don't know what's going to happen after this season, especially with coaching staff. You have no idea what's going to happen. So you put all your chips on the table basically, and you see what plays out. And I hope he does it.
It's going to be an exciting time, and definitely, we'll have you definitely back to discuss more about what possibly Bill Zito can do, and something that Bill Zito told Emily Kaplan of ESPN. He told her, she mentioned it on the In the Crease podcast, is that Bill Zito has been trying to make a trade all year, but teams have been a little nervous to try to make one. So maybe that's a negotiating tactic, trying to get that out publicly. So maybe, who knows? So they're not going to show their hand, but they're just trying to maybe put some intimidation out there. But we're going to transition to the next segment. We're going to talk more about the state of the division. We'll talk a little bit about Spencer Knight, what's been going on down in Charlotte, and we'll talk a little bit more about all that on the next segment here on Locked On Panthers. But first, let me tell you all about BetOnline. Football season might be over this season, but basketball is in full steam for both pro and college hoops. From all the latest odds, totals, player performance props to where the next fired coach is going to land, BetOnline.net is the number one spot for all your sports betting needs. BetOnline remains the best spot for all your sports scores, podcasts, and news this season. And it's not just basketball. BetOnline.net is your source for hockey, boxing, and UFC odds, right to the Olympic coverage and information. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more about the trends and action. BetOnline, where the game starts. Third and final segment here on the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast. I'm Armando Velez. I got Nick Fairbanks from Panther Parkway here to discuss this 3-0 win against the Ottawa Senators. So, Nick, Bobrovsky gets a shutout, 17 of 17. The night before, the Charlotte Checkers visit the Hershey Bears, and Spencer Knight goes 44 of 44 for the Checkers. And it's just great to see that the goaltending, as far as Spencer's development, is starting to come together a little bit. We love to see this at the NHL level. Bobrovsky, I think he's like 8 wins away from setting the franchise record for wins in Florida Panthers history, even though goalie wins can be a little bit of a flawed stat. But great to see that this is going on back-to-back nights, that this 1A and 1B, even because let's be real, Johansson doesn't have a future in Florida, but great that the 1A and 1B are performing at the levels that they're performing.
It's that word again, consistency. The fact that both goaltenders could put up, stats like that, especially Spencer in the night before, where he puts up 44 out of 44 and actually made some really highlight real saves, just goes to show that, maybe he's starting to figure things out a little bit more. He's not, putting as much pressure on himself. He's not fighting the puck anymore. And maybe he's really trying to find his game again. So it's very helpful. It's very, good to see. It really, begs the question whether, if it's better for Spencer's development, whether he stays down in Charlotte and Florida makes a move for a backup goaltender for the rest of the season. Is it better in the long run for him, or do we run the risk of putting him and Bob to go into the playoffs?
I think that I think he'll be back. My gut tells me he'll be back. After, I know the playoffs last year was only his 5th and 6th game ever played in the NHL level after getting 4 regular season games last year. But just seeing what he did in Game 5, and I was listening to The Athletic today, and the Jesse Granger and Sean McIndoe were talking about how whenever goalies go on a hot streak, a lot of people freak out saying that they've lost it. People don't say that about wingers or centers but people like to say that about goalies. And I just felt like this whole time Spencer Knight was always going to be fine. And that after seeing how not quickly, but how slowly he's been able to better his game in Charlotte. You're taking advantage of him being on an ELC. Johansson is likely going to be placed on waivers before the trade deadline. They have a back-to-back. I doubt you put Bob there. So chances are we might see him and he might stay up here. Maybe one more trip down there. Who knows? We don't know what that's going to look like. But if you see a good start from Spencer, I think right off the gate, I think he's staying the rest of the season. And I think that, of course, if Bob doesn't have a good performance in the playoffs, you've seen it before. We can absolutely see it again that Spencer Knight gets put in.
Definitely. And if that comes to be where he does come back up to the team and he's able to make his mark and he's able to, solidify that backup goaltending spot, then I think they'll be okay. The one thing you mentioned has me a little concerned, and I've mentioned this on a previous recording, that if the Panthers have to go to a backup goaltender, or let's just say they pick up another goaltender at the trade deadline and they go to a third goaltender in the playoffs, they're not winning a series.
I agree.
They need to stick with one. And right now, I think this season that Bob is having has really built up his confidence, and it's also shown that the defense can play with him and also play to his style. So it's going to be tough because I want to see Spencer in the biggest games possible, but I'm also a Bobrovsky fan, and I want to see him accomplish something that he set out to do when he signed here. It's not often that you see a player come down here to South Florida and sign a max contract at all. And, you want to be able to get the value out of that contract. And I know a lot of people have been down about Bob since he got here and everything, but, it took some time for him to really find his place and to really get mentally there. He's had to get off of social media to really get to where he is today. And, hats off to him. And, hopefully he can carry us to the promised land.
And if he does, you won't hear $10 million cap hit complaints ever again. Everyone,
$10 million worth it.
Yeah,
every dollar.
That conversation will come to an end for sure. And that's what's going to be hanging over him as long as the Florida Panthers don't make long playoff runs. But before we get out of here, I also want to talk a little bit about yesterday's Checkers game of who was in attendance. A few Philadelphia Flyers scouts were in attendance to see the Checkers game against the Hershey Bears. And I think they might have been scouting Owen Tippett, who now has 7 points in 6 games for the Charlotte Checkers, got an empty net goal yesterday. So, I mean, a goal is a goal, and that's a point towards his production. So we'll take it. So I don't know if they get Drew, but the Flyers scouts being in attendance kind of makes me question, and kind of makes me wonder of if it's going to happen.
What if the Flyers GM is the one that's afraid to make the move? And that was Zito kind of calling him out a little bit, saying, hey, let's do this. Like, you already know where your team's going this season. Let's not lose Giroux for nothing. I got a guy right here who's producing right now and ready and available for your team. This is always the time to always watch to see who's at games. One thing that was not presented in today's game, at the Panthers game, Steve Yzerman was in attendance.
Yes.
There's been a little bit of smoke surrounding Florida and Detroit. Now, I don't know what they're looking at, because between you and me, there's nothing on the defensive side besides Mo Sider on that defense that I want. Now, if it's a switch between Owen Tippett and maybe one of their forwards, like a Philip Zadina, who they're trying to get going right now, it might be good for both players to get a new look at things. But never count out Stevie Y, because he's been quiet right now, and I'm interested to see if he was actually scouting Florida or if he was scouting Ottawa tonight to make his team a little bit better.
And I'm looking at the Red Wings schedule right now. And their
Guess
first end
what?
of a back-to-back is Friday in Tampa. So he's going from Sunrise to Emily Arena back to Sunrise in
Yep.
just a matter of days. So,
Yes, I think he is heavily scouting Florida.
hmm,
I think he's honestly, I do think he is looking at somebody. And I will be in attendance for date night on Saturday night. Hopefully, the Panthers can pull it out convincingly. But keep an eye on the Red Wings, guys. I would not be surprised to see that there's a deal swung around a forward or two.
mhm. And, uh, and it's got hopefully it's a very calm time for you and your wife, as, your wife is a Red for those listening, Nick's wife is a Red Wings fan, so division rival being at the game together. I hope you have fun, first of all, but
Oh,
I
we
hope
will
it's
until
a
the third period.
until the third period, okay. But let me know how that goes, man. But that's gonna be fun. But for everyone listening, you can follow Nick Fairbanks at Prudentia0. You can follow me on Twitter at MondoMan12. And a good win for the Florida Panthers. One more game on the homestand before they take a quick 2-game trip up in the Northeast in Pittsburgh and Buffalo before returning for one against Philadelphia. And then it's on to the West Coast. So, Nick, thank you once again for joining me on this debut episode of Fairbanks Friday on the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast. And can't wait to do this next week, man.
Anytime, and thank you again for having me on. Look forward to having to being on again next week.
Thanks so much, man. And if you like what you're hearing, please subscribe to the podcast so you'll be notified every single time the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast jumps into your podcast feed. Make sure to subscribe to Locked On NHL and the Crosscheck NHL show with Andrew Berkshire and Mary Clark, where they'll be covering all the regular season activities around the National Hockey League. Thank you for making the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast your first listen of the day. And for your second listen of the day, make sure to listen to today's episode of Locked On Fantasy Hockey. Host Steel Roden and Flip Livingstone help you become the expert of your fantasy league. It's free and available wherever you get podcasts. So I'm Armando Velez with Nick Fairbanks. And you've been listening to the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. We're your team every day.